Jesus rose, so Thomas is saying, Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week. Jesus appeared to the disciples on the first day of the week. And these are all cited, but I'm not going to read them all in detail. Jesus appeared inside the room to the 11 disciples 8 days after the first day of the week. The Jewish way of measuring days meant that it was again Sunday. The Holy Spirit came on Pentecost, the first day of the week. The first sermon was preached by Peter on the first day of the week. 3,000 converts joined the church on the first day of the week. 3,000 were baptized on the first day of the week. The Christians assembled, broke bread on the first day of the week. The Christians also heard a message from Paul on the first day of the week. Note, the reference is until midnight, which is not the Jewish method of measuring days, but the Roman system. Paul instructed the churches to put aside contributions on the first day of the week. Jesus gave the apostle John the vision of Revelation on the first day of the week.
All right, my friend.
I'm not entirely clear on what the question is here.
I think my friend Thomas is saying here is, we've definitely promoted that, the seventh day Sabbath is still binding as it's written by God's finger in his law in stone. And, God blessed it at creation. Jesus kept it when he was alive. And it says in Isaiah 66 that we're going to keep it in heaven. So we're pretty clear from Bible Ask that we believe in the keeping of the seventh day Sabbath. That's just stated in the Bible. Now, what our friend Thomas seems to be saying is, well, look at all these verses pointing to the first day of the week after, Jesus was crucified. And so I hear you. And so, Thomas, I want to start with a verse for you in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. And it reads basically, Jesus Christ the same, yesterday, today, and forever. So Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Right? So let's think about very far yesterday as far as creation, where it talks about the first day of the week. And in Genesis 1, basically in verse 3, it says, God said, let there be light, and there was light. Correct? So the first day of the week, God had a plan. He's like, at the beginning in creation, the first day, his work was to say, let there be light. And I would say that many of these instances, as far as, Jesus starting, after Jesus, resurrected on the first day, he was starting, saying, let there be light. The Pentecost being on the first day, let there be light. This mirrors his work of creation. And there's so many things on the first day that did happen that were good things. They're not bad things. They're works of God or they're works of the disciples, but they are not a Sabbath, because a Sabbath means to rest. It means to stop. Means to not work. And so at creation, again, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, it says, and the seventh day God rested from all his works, which God created and made, and he blessed it and hallowed it. So he made that day holy at creation yet again. And throughout the life of Jesus, rests on the Sabbath. You see his disciples resting on the Sabbath. The only thing, and these verses are not wrong that these disciples did things on the Sabbath. They did break bread, but it also, if you look at that verse where you're saying they break bread.
But does that mean anything?
But they broke bread every single day. They said they broke bread daily. And so breaking bread was a daily thing. It wasn't anything set aside for like a worship service. It was just them getting together and eating, or maybe doing a communion service or whatever, but it wasn't something that was an act of worship.
They were very communal, living together. I mean, you had 70 people in one room for pretty much 40 days, right before Pentecost?
10 days, if I'm not mistaken, because
10 days, yeah.
And the whole thing with Pentecost is it happened, which is very interesting. You brought it up. You put Leviticus chapter 26, verse 13, which is talking about the feast of first fruits. And that's how we know when Pentecost was, because it was 50 days after the Passover, because Jesus died at the Passover. And then there's this feast that happens 50 days
plus
later.
1.
Exactly. And so, but it's 7 Sabbaths. And then the next day after those 7 Sabbaths is when this feast of first fruits begins. And the thing
actually, this is a verse Thomas cites as supposedly evidence that Sabbath got changed.
Exactly. But the thing is, it's saying there's 7 Sabbaths that need to happen. So again, it's reiterating that the Sabbath is very important. And even 7 Sabbaths, God is pointing to 7, because the seventh day the number 7 is very important to God. And we see that in the book of Revelation with the 7 seals and the 7 last plagues and the 7 trumpets. There's something important to God about the number 7, and we need to respect that. And the thing is too, as far as the, putting aside money on the first day, that's a church business meeting. Like, just like your
or
church.
not even that.
Yeah.
What he's saying is, too, is like you don't save up for your tithe at the end. Like, you start your week putting away your tithe.
Exactly.
Make it the first thing you do.
Exactly. It's a first day work. And all these, I think the last thing I wanted to bring up was, and then you say at the end that the Lord's day is Revelation chapter 1, verse 10. That is not true.
No evidence of that.
There is no evidence of that. Jesus actually says
all it says is the Lord's day.
Exactly. Jesus says in Mark chapter 2, verse 28, that Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. So that is not the first day of the week. I'm sorry. Yeah. Revelation was not given by inspiration on the first day. It was given on the 7th-day Sabbath, because the 7th-day Sabbath is the Lord's day. So, while I respect your thoughts and opinions, my brother, I have to respectfully say, these are interesting. There are mentions of the first day because God definitely wants you to do work on the first day, because in 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath unto the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any labor. And I'm directly quoting his commandment he wrote with his finger on stone that you read in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. And you really can't deny that. Now, one last thing I will tell you, though, as far as, could God have changed the 7th-day Sabbath to the first day? Let's read about it in Hebrews chapter 4, because Paul says something very, very interesting in Hebrews chapter 4, verses 4 through 10. And basically it says, and unto Moses, when he made for he spake in a certain place of the 7th day on this wise, and God did rest the 7th day from all his works. Seeing therefore it remains that some must enter in, in verse 5 it says, and in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest. So God is saying the 7th day is my rest. And verse 6 says, seeing therefore it remains that some must enter therein, they to whom it was first preached entered not because of unbelief. So it's because of unbelief that people don't want to enter into God's rest that he set aside on the 7th day. And it says in verse 7, again, he limits a certain day, saying to David, today, after so long a time, as it is said, today, if you will hear my voice, harden not your hearts. And verse 8 reads, or designates a certain day, limits a day. So, for if Joshua had given them rest, he would have not afterward have spoken of another day. So if God was going to tell us that, hey, there's another day of rest, he would have spoken of it, but he didn't. And verse 9 and 10 go on to say, there remains therefore a rest for the people of God, the 7th-day Sabbath rest he gave us at creation. And verse 10 just basically reads, for he who has entered into his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from his. And when did God cease from his works? On the 7th day, as it says in Genesis 2 and 3. Again, God's saying there is a rest. It's the rest I gave you at creation. And if there was another day of rest, I would have told it to you. But no, there's not. And all these references to the first day just reiterate that first day is the day of work. It's not a day of worship. It's a day of work to do God's will, which is fine that you do the first day to the 6th day, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. And there's just no rebuttal against that, because even in, like I said, as it says in Isaiah 66, from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, so shall all come and worship before the Lord. And this is speaking of the new heavens and the new earth. And so I'm sorry, God doesn't change. Like I said at the beginning, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. So anyways, Jay or Wendy, any other thoughts on that? I'm sorry if I beat this to death.
What the last thing you said made me remember, so it's not that necessarily, like, for example, Pentecost, it's 49 plus 1. And this concept of like a 7 plus 1, which equals 8, is a recurring theme in the Bible. So you look at the people who came onto the ark. How many were there? It was 7 plus 1, 8 people. It's like the new beginning for the human race. And I forget other examples of this, but usually that's the example. It's a new beginning is what it's talking about. It's not a new rest period. It's not a completion of a cycle. All these things are pointing to the beginning of a new era. Christ's resurrection on the first day is the beginning of a new dispensation, the new covenant. The Pentecost coming on the disciples. Again, it's a new beginning of a new relationship. The Holy Spirit working with us differently than it has before, and with great power. So that's what we're seeing here. It's not necessarily even one. It's actually 8 that we're dealing with, the number in these situations, or 49 plus 1, 50.
Yeah.
And again, we need to, just because events happen on a day doesn't mean that change the day. I mean, we could look at other significant events in the Bible, and some happen on Tuesday, some happen on Wednesday, some happen Thursday. Is God telling us now we need to do something on that particular day? No, not unless God specifically gave us a way of counting and saying, on this day, do something in particular. There's times where he did that.
But again, when God is writing his 10 commandments with his finger in stone, and he's saying he's going to put these laws in our heart, that just doesn't change.
Yeah.
Like I
said, again, the commandment is to keep the Sabbath, keep the seventh day holy. It's not making it holy, because he made it holy back on the first week, on the seventh day. And so just as the first day, the evening and morning were one day, that's a fact, God said. The seventh day is the Sabbath, that's just a fact, because God said it was so. Made it so, because he separated that day. This day is now special.
Yeah. And one last thing to just say, and I have to say, I do feel for my brothers and sisters who, do keep have kept Sunday as a day of rest for their lives. And, that's been their tradition. It's been, what they've known their whole lives. And I think it's very difficult to just be like, whoa, like what I've been doing all this time is not the right thing. How could I have been wrong? How could my parents have been wrong? How could my pastor that I trust, who led me to Jesus, be wrong? And, the thing is, it's not that, obviously I'm not saying, that your parents or your pastor are bad people or anything like that. But I think that sometimes traditions get passed down, and they're not always biblical. And,
actually, that's where I wanted to go next too. Is that Daniel 7 verse 25, it talks about, a lot of people recognize as the Antichrist, and it says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws. Times and laws. Is there a commandment that is both a time and a law? There's only one.
Yeah.
And so, and we believe this has already happened. We believe Antichrist has already come, and he's still around, will still appear again too, but this has already come to pass. And so, it's a tradition that people have been following for centuries, not because it was biblical, but because someone changed it or thought they changed it. As the verse says, think to change.
Yeah, they'd like to. It's in their mind. But yeah, and again, it's just so important that, we choose the commandments of God rather than the traditions of men. Jesus talks about that multiple times, that you hold fast the traditions of your fathers, but rather than the commandments of God. And we really need to put God first and his law first, because that's what he said. And if we love God, we keep his commandments. And, I understand that, this might be going against, what your tradition of your family has been, but you really need to come to a point where you say, God, I'm going to follow you no matter what. No matter what what the world thinks, no matter what my parents think, no matter what anybody says, I'm going to follow God. And, if God came to me one day and was just like, Tuesday is my day. I know you got this mixed up, but here it is. I would say, what, Lord, this has been my tradition, but I will change what I have always known for you, because that's what you do when you love somebody. It's that pearl of great price. You sell all that you have to purchase this pearl, just like the parable says. And that's what it comes down to with Jesus. Will you sacrifice all, your past, your traditions, your culture, for the sake of the gospel, for what God is telling you through his word? Because it is very important to him. if it wasn't, he wouldn't have written it down. This is the only part of the Bible God wrote himself. And so are you going to just be like, it doesn't matter, we cast it away? No, you can't do that, not with God's word. And I always want to address, people then bring up Colossians 2:14-16, where it basically says, don't let people judge you with Sabbath days. But those Sabbath days it's talking about, it says that's a handwriting of ordinances. Those are the Levitical law. That's not the Sabbath day set apart at creation. Because obviously God, like we said, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. And his law doesn't change.
Because it says those Sabbaths that were abolished were types and shadows of things to come.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sabbath is a memorial of things past, of creation.
It's very true.